Hello and welcome to this new video series on AQA GCSE Religious Studies, the themes. We're looking at the thematic studies. This is video 1 on theme D, religion, peace and conflict. And today we're looking at just an introduction to the topic of peace and conflict. We're going to be hoping to, by the end of this lesson, have a great understanding of some of the really key concepts that we need which underpin this whole topic. And they're peace, justice, forgiveness and reconciliation. Each lesson we will have a need to know, and the need to know is what you want to be able to walk away from the lesson and have it at the back of your mind. If it gets to the end of the lesson and you don't know it, maybe rewind and have another watch. But today you need to know that peace is an end goal for all religious people. However, there are disagreements about what can be done to obtain that peace. We're going to dive right on in now and look at our 4 key concepts that we need to understand which underpin this whole unit. And they are peace, justice, forgiveness and reconciliation. Our first key concept we need to understand for this topic is peace. Now, on a preliminary level, you probably understand peace to mean the absence of war. And yes, it does mean that. It does mean the absence of war. It means the absence of conflict. But actually, there's a lot more to peace than that. In Judaism, we use the word shalom when we talk about peace. And that's really talking about a wholeness, a completeness. It's like an inner complete and wholeness that means that you are then able to bless others. It's like pouring out of you to bless others. And so when we think about peace, try and challenge yourself. It's not just about the absence of war, it's about complete harmony, and it's a great place to be in. If we look to the Bible and see what it says about peace in there, in the Sermon of the Mount, in the Beatitudes right at the start, Jesus says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God." And Jesus is saying here that the people who work for peace in this world, who work for the absence of conflict, but also for harmony for themselves and others in their community, can be called children of God. Because peace is something and wholeness is something that's really, really important to God. If we do a rewind back to the Tanakh, to the Old Testament, we can see there's a lot of verses about what we call the Messianic age. So Jews believe that when the Messiah comes, is going to usher in the Messianic age. And a big attribute of that age is the idea that there is going to be world peace. And you can see here from Isaiah chapter 2 verse 4, nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. And so for Christians and for Jews, they look forward to a future time where there is no war, there is harmony and there is peace. Our next key concept is justice. And justice means fairness, but it also means working to bring about fairness for others. There is so much in the Bible about justice. There are so many quotes. If you Google it, justice in the Bible, you'll see you get a whole bunch of quotes come up. But just the one I've picked out for today comes from Isaiah 61 verse 8. And it says, "For I, the Lord, love justice." And being fair and just is so intrinsic to who God is. It should therefore be important to people who call themselves followers of God. There's bits in the Bible where it says that, the true worship for God is about working for justice for others, especially those who cannot get justice for themselves. So justice is a really, really key idea for Christians and Jews and other religious people when thinking about peace and conflict. Our third key concept is forgiveness. And forgiveness, especially for Christians, is incredibly, incredibly important. It's a key aspect of Christianity, and it's right really at the heart of the Christian message. The gospel, the good news of Jesus, part of that is that all humans need to be forgiven. The Bible says that all humans have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and therefore need forgiveness. That is why Jesus came to die, so that we could be forgiven. And part of that, and this is a really drastic teaching for Christians, is that because they've been forgiven hugely because of grace and they haven't earned it, they then in turn need to forgive others in life. So they're not to hold grievances, they're always to forgive. At one point in the Bible, one of Jesus' disciples said, "Well, Jesus, how many times should I forgive? 7 times? That's a lot of times." And Jesus replied, 7, try 77 times 7, meaning you just need to forgive no matter what happens. The many times you have to forgive, you need to forgive. When we look at Jesus' teaching on this in the Sermon on the Mount, we're looking back to that famous sermon of Jesus. He says, "If you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins." You might have heard this referenced in the Lord's Prayer, where it says, "Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us." One of my favourite lines in the Lord's Prayer. But it basically means that for Christians, because they've been forgiven so much, they then have to forgive as well. There's aspects in the Bible where it's almost like it's contractual. It's like, you've forgiven us and we will forgive others. You're going to forgive us as we forgive others. So forgiveness, really, really key for Christians. Our fourth key concept today, and again, we're using these 4 concepts today that underpin this whole unit, is reconciliation. And reconciliation, again, is a really, really key part of Christianity. Reconciliation is what happens after forgiveness. Forgiveness happens so that reconciliation can then happen. We know that Jesus came and he died so we could be forgiven and then reconciled to God. You probably are aware of that famous Christmas carol, "Hark now, hear the angels sing." There's a line in that where it says, "God and sinners reconciled." And that is the message of Christianity. That's the message of Christmas. That's the purpose of Jesus, is he came to reconcile God to us. Now, again, in the same way, you can see a pattern here, that reconciliation happens between God and humans, and then Christians are called to reconcile others as well. It's the outplaying of that reconciliation that has occurred. It's a key part of Christianity, and it's incredibly, incredibly important. Classic verse here comes from Matthew 5, and this is really, again, from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. What's really interesting about this is that Jesus says, if you go to the temple and you're going to do some worship, you're going to give your gift at the altar, but if you get there and remember that your brother or your sister has something against you, leave your gift there, go and sort that out, go and be reconciled to them, and then come and offer your gift. And this was really revolutionary at the time, to say, actually, what's clear here is what's more important to God in this regard, rather than doing some ritualistic worship, is to go and get right with someone in your community and sort out, be reconciled, sort out that relationship, and then come to God. And it just shows to Jesus what a high priority reconciliation is. So these are our 4 key concepts, and all of these are related to one of the big topics of this whole topic, which is conflict. The idea of falling out, having an issue that has put a barrier or a gap between you and someone else, and conflict often leads to war, and it often leads to violence. But these really important religious ideas of peace, forgiveness and reconciliation, and justice are all really, really important when considering the idea of conflict. So over to you guys now. It's time to check your understanding. I'd like to pause the video here, have a go at these questions in your own time, in your own words, and when you're ready, unpause it, and I'll talk through some possible answers for you. Okay, well, hopefully you've done that now and you've unpaused it so you're ready to hear some ideas. So in your own words, explain what is meant by, and then the following. So the first word there is peace, and we talked about peace as, yes, being the absence of conflict, of war, but also harmony, wholeness, and a great loving community where people get along and bless each other. Justice. Justice is fairness, and it's bringing about what is right and fair for everyone. Forgiveness. Forgiveness is pardoning someone who has done something wrong to you, choosing to pardon them. Reconciliation is rebuilding a relationship after it has broken down, coming back together again after a fallout or after conflict. Now, how do each of these relate to conflict? Well, peace is the absence of conflict. Justice relates to conflict for a couple of reasons, actually. It might be that someone feels they've been treated unfairly, unjustly, and therefore it moves to a conflict. Or it could be that something needs to be put in place, justice needs to be done in order to resolve a conflict. Forgiveness. Forgiveness is often really, really important after a conflict where someone has been hurt or harmed. And then we can move this again to reconciliation. Reconciliation is coming back together again after that conflict. And these are all related to conflict, and hopefully you can see how they match up there. Number 3, Christians are taught to forgive others no matter what they have done. Do you think this is realistic? Well, one aspect to consider here is that Christians are human, and humans are, no one is perfect, and it can be very, very difficult to forgive someone, especially when they've harmed you in a recent or powerful way. And if you're still hurt from something that someone else has done, it can be very, very difficult to forgive. However, Christians are commanded to forgive anyway. We're going to look at this in a bit more detail in a future lesson on forgiveness, but it's a really important thing to consider when thinking about conflict. In your opinion, is it acceptable to kill others in order to bring about peace? This is down to you guys. You need to have to think about this for your own self. You need to have a think, especially for this topic, what you think about killing. You'll be familiar with the 10 Commandments, says do not murder. We'll look at this again in a while, but for some Christians they would apply that to killing in a war and some wouldn't. But you need to come up to your own ideas about that one. Number 5, justice is more important than reconciliation. Do you agree? I wonder what you wrote for that. You might have thought, yes, justice is more important than reconciliation. It's more important that everyone gets fair treatment than people come back together again and get along. It might be if this person's been harmed by this person needs to get their own back or have their status fulfilled, or if they've been stolen from, to get that stuff back so it's fair, and that's more important than necessarily these people getting along. Others would say reconciliation is far more important than justice, because in order for our communities and society to work well together, we need to have a lack of barriers and a lack of gaps between us, and therefore reconciliation should be incredibly important for that. And again, others would say they're both equally important, in that some would say you need justice to be done for reconciliation to occur. So there's some thoughts for you today. So that brings us to the end of this session, and just to revisit our need to know there, peace is an end goal for all religious people. However, there are disagreements about what should be done to obtain it. And as we go through these following lessons, you're going to understand a little bit more about what religious people think about violence and war, and how people should be treated who've committed violent acts, and how people should be treated who've been the victims of violent acts too. Look forward to catching up with you again soon. Have a blessed day.